Hi, hello, it's Kendo here. If you're new around here, welcome. If you're not new around here, what is up, home skillet biscuit? And happy Saturday. If you don't know what Saturday is when I generally do a thing called Bad Movies in a Beat, the series on my channel where I talk about bad movies while putting my makeup on. But we're not talking about a bad movie and my makeup is already on because I have a lot to talk about this week, baby. It's a dense one. It's a lot to discuss. So much so that I'm pretty sure that we're going to have to do a two-parter, giving you very much so like when I did my videos on Midsommar. But before we get into that, hello, I'm sorry I missed you last week. It was because I had period depression. It's debilitating. It can really take you out sometimes. And I was sleeping 20 hours a day for like 4 days. So I'm well rested. Thank you for those of you that messaged me and was like, I hope you're okay. Take some rest off, blah, blah, blah. With that said, I've been everywhere, man. I've been everywhere. I was on 2 podcasts last week on More Butter. For those of you that don't know, I now have a podcast. It's called In Defense Of. So I did an episode on there. I also did an episode with Mr. Gigi for camp counselors. I also did a midweek video. So if you wanted to check out those videos, those will be linked as well. But right before my mental health went into the shitter, I did film an ad read. I think I mentioned being on my period during that ad read and they let me do it. So I'm going to send that over to Admiral Kennie, who was also very over it at the time. Hello everyone, it's Admiral Kennie and it's Shark Week, so pardon me if I sound pretty low energy. But do you know what uplifts my spirits? Smelling good. Today's video is sponsored by Scentbird. No, that's hilarious. Okay. Yeah, today's video is sponsored by Scentbird, which is an online subscription service that allows you to try out and discover new and exciting scents, usually from brands that are very expensive if you try out the full bottle or commit to the full bottle. Buying perfume online for $150 only to get it back and you realize it stank. Well, with Scentbird, you can try out various scents for only $16 a month and you get a 30-day supply that you can try out and really, go about your life with and see how it actually fits with your lifestyle and body chemistry. You take a quiz, I love a quiz, and you can figure out what are some suggested scents for you based off of your mood and what you're into. Now, even though they're 30-day supplies, they claim to be 30-day supplies, I think that's just to be on the safe side. Honestly, I can use mine for much longer than that, give or take 2 months if I'm using it consistently. They have luxury brands like Gucci, Dolce & Gabbana, Fendi and Madonna. So you can try out a scent or several scents if you upgrade your subscription without all of the commitment. You can upgrade to 2 or 3 scents per month. You can also gift people a scent subscription for 3, 6, or 12 months. So it's great as a gift or for birthdays as well. And they also come with these cards that describe what each of the scents are, which I love anything that comes with a description card. It makes me feel like a connoisseur. This month was a really good lot. Again, I'm a very picky scent person. I think I've said this before. Everything gives me a headache and I don't like to smell like an old lady or musty because a lot of perfume, especially really expensive perfume, actually stank. And if you're not careful, you could be walking around smelling like a shoebox. Catherine Malandrino. I know Spanish. No, that's definitely Italian. Transcendent. Really nice. This says it has a background of watery greens, dewy fruit, pink rose, cashmere musk, and sandalwood. It's watery, but it doesn't smell like the ocean, which I don't like. But this definitely smells like you by a pond picking juices and berries. Ulrich Lang, New York. Lethe. Okay. You educated. It's a base of bergamot, a lavender, water lily, tonka bean, and vanilla. I like it a little bit more spicy, a little bit less sweet, and just like a hint of vanilla at the end. Kenzie's So Pretty. Bergamot, pink lady apple, tangerine, iris, and sandalwood. But again, something a little lighter. It's springy but warm. Michael Hermione, Paris. Sexual Noir, which is vanilla. I don't know words apparently. Vetiver. Okay. It's a grass. Amber, pink orchid, and jasmine. I think it's leaning towards unisex. A little sweet. Weirdly enough, this smells more citrusy than the other ones that had like tangerine in it. Good lot this time. Great lot. So if you would like to check out Scentbird, that'll be linked down below. Feel free to use code KennieJD55 to get 55% off your first purchase. Big thanks again to Scentbird for sponsoring today's video. Now let's get on to the debauchery, baby. So the last time we were here, we talked about the fourth Gabriel's Inferno movie, which would be Gabriel's Rapture Part 1. Y'all were very confused. I had so many people like adding me on Twitter. They were like, Part 1? Part 1? Yes. We're on the fourth movie and we're on Part 1, baby. If you'd like to check out that movie, that'll be linked up above, or you can check it out in the Bad Movies in a Beat playlist. Speaking of which, considering today is more of a good movies situation, I'm still going to put it in the Bad Movies in a Beat playlist, but I also have a good movies and a glam playlist where we talk about movies that I actually like. So this week, we are talking about a movie that I admittedly enjoyed, albeit left me very conflicted and uneasy. Now, me personally, I think the movie's quite good in like a technical sense and kind of the uncomfortable, wheezy questions that we present through it. But I do know from what I hear that this movie is quite controversial. Today, we are talking about a Spanish film, The Skin I Live In, don't blame me, I took Spanish for 4 years and you'd have no clue. La piel que habito. There you go. 2011. It is starring Antonio Banderas and directed by Pedro, I'm about to play myself, Almodovar. Yeah. This movie was initially introduced to me way back when I did my video on pieles, skins, 2000. Oh God, when did that movie come out? I don't know, but I did the video on it last year. Like, I think it was the first Bad Movies in a Beat of 2021. It's the movie about the girl with a butthole for a mouth and a mouth for a butthole. And so people were bringing this up as if it were weird in a similar way, which I resent because no, it's not. The only similarities is that both movies are weird. And that both movies come from Spain. If anything, I think Pieles was trying too hard to be like a serious movie, but it still had a leading lady with a butthole for a mouth. So, but this movie is not at all like that, though very disturbing. But this movie is in a lot of ways way more sophisticated, dare I say elevated, from Butthole Mouth Girl. It has a lot of very sophisticated and uncomfortable questions to pose about sex, gender, and how both of those things relate to sexual violence or violence in general. It's not surprising that the movie is admittedly quite controversial from what I hear. But one thing about controversial movies is they're always ripe for conversation, discussion, debate, if you will. So I'm going to put my little hat on. For those of you that don't know, I think a lot of people actually don't know this. I at one point wanted to be a professor, so that's why I'm such a fucking nerd. This feels like a very much so, let's bring this to class, everyone. We're going to discuss Socratic seminar. Like I said, this movie's definitely going to need 2 videos. One, because I feel like, one, it's a longer movie. There's a lot happening, a lot to describe. And 2, I'm curious what the debates or thoughts will arise from just talking about the movie proper and not really adding a whole lot of my opinion yet. I think that'll be more from part 2. I will say this without going too much on my opinion on the movie, that it is truly an experience. So with that said, this video will spoil it. So if you would like to hold off and watch the movie and then come back, that would be great. Or if you would like to have me walk you through it, that's also fine. It is a rather triggering and disturbing movie for a lot of people. So it's up to you. Do what you want. But with that said, I will be spoiling. I will tell the ending because the ending is what a lot of people are like, huh? Yes. So with that said, a few verbal trigger warnings because there's a lot. Most things, I feel like. We're talking quite a bit about SA, violence, torture, suicide. Also, I realized that this movie could also cause a lot of gender dysphoria. So that's also a trigger warning that you should consider. These are like core elements to the movie. So if you feel like those will be too much to handle, even with me just talking about them, then feel free to sit this one out. Again, nothing is worth your mental health, dude. So let's walk into La piel que habito, The Skin I Live In, 2011. So when the film begins, we meet a woman, and she is dressed from head to toe in like a skin-tight, skin-colored bodysuit. She's in a room doing yoga all to herself. She seems to be kind of encased in this room, sort of like a doll. She spends her days puttering around, making dolls out of cloth. She receives meals and medication through the dumbwaiter. She also receives other form of entertainments, books, things to keep her busy in this room. And it is pretty apparent from the jump that she is, for all intents and purposes, a prisoner here in this pretty little room where seemingly she can't leave. The main servant that tends to her name is Marilia. Marilia Mary. Next, we meet a doctor, played by Antonio Banderas, is on the brink of a new innovation in which he can do skin grafts and facial transplants from corpses to living people, particularly for those that have suffered from burns, like severe burns, and need reconstructive surgery. He has created a new form of basically a new skin, make the new musculature so that it can gesticulate like a normal face would. And he's presenting this new, innovative, and admittedly controversial science to a bunch of his peers at a conference. What we can garner pretty quickly is that Robert is somewhat of a bigwig in this field, partially because his house is very, very nice. It's large. He has his own lab in there. And apparently within this lab, he's able to do his studying of something that we can garner as somewhat nefarious. And also while he's there, he can look in on his patient. Seems to be that woman doing yoga in the room. Apparently the woman's name is Vera, and we don't really know a lot about like the circumstances that brought her here, what made her a patient of Robert's. There just feels like something's a little creepy Ickerson about it, because Robert just spends too much time looking at her longingly. And it's real gross. One day while going in to give her medication, Robert finds Vera nearly dead from an attempted but he's able to go in and patch up her wounds before it's too late. And we get the sense that Vera is very much so trapped. If given the opportunity, she would simply, take that route. Robert is keeping her alive. And again, we don't really know the circumstances. We can probably guess that she's being tested on in some way. One of the things that he's testing on her is his artificial skin thing. Apparently the invention's name is gall. It is this new form of mosquito repelling, fire resistant skin that is able to be transplanted onto humans and make it so that we don't contract things like malaria, that we can't be burned alive. Apparently the name comes from Robert's deceased wife who died in a car accident that burned her alive. And so he did it in honor of her so that he can find ways that people are no longer affected in that way. But before he can get his work approved by other scientists, he's actually pulled aside by one of the heads of the board, the ethics board for scientists, and they essentially say, you're doing something that's not right. There's like I found this out when I did my splice video, that apparently we have all the technology to like copy humans, but something vaguely ethics related is why we don't do it. Frightening. But he basically is pulled to the side by this ethics board guy who is like, whatever you're doing sounds like some shit that we're not supposed to be doing or whatever. And so long story short, he's like, I'm going to report you to the ethics board if you keep fucking around like this. So he then decides that he's going to give up on his research, and therefore he has Vera as this test subject, and we don't know what to do with her. And Vera, who is again completely discontent within her little cage here, tries to convince Robert to perhaps let her go. She seduces him with the prospect of being together as a couple, as like a normal couple where you don't have to hide me away, that I can be your equal. But he refuses and leaves her locked inside. Mary, that is not her name, just follow with me. I can't say Marilia. Marilia, the servant and also seemingly somewhat of a maternal figure for Robert. She chastises him for making Vera look so much like his deceased wife. Apparently the resemblance is uncanny, and she thinks that it's a very weird and very creepy thing that he created this new being that looks just like his dead wife. She also says that he's going to have to figure out whether or not to kill Vera or figure out how to keep her locked away forever. Robert seems to be struggling with which decision to make, and it probably doesn't make it any easier that Vera, this test subject, we don't really know much about her, but she apparently looks a lot like his deceased wife. Robert decides to fire all of his servants except for Mary. Time passes and it's carnival. Everyone is dressed up, everyone's having a great time, everyone's drunk in the streets. In comes a seemingly random man dressed as a tiger, dinging the doorbell intercom at Robert's home. He says that he's looking for his mother there, and Mary answers the intercom, says that if she was a servant, she's been fired because Robert's fired everybody. And then this man randomly pulls down his pants to show a birthmark on his ass. And apparently this indicates that he is Mary's long-lost son, Zika. Apparently, Zika has been on the run for a while from various crimes, something that does not surprise Mary, so you can kind of indicate what their relationship has been. But he basically convinces her to let him come inside, have a meal, and ultimately tries to threaten her so that she will hide him inside of the home while he's trying to not get caught by police. He was found on security tapes trying to steal jewelry in the area, so he's like, "Let me hide out here, Ma." And she's like, "No." He says that he wants to hide out there, and then when Robert comes back home, he would like to tell him, essentially force him to do operations on his face where he has scars, something that Mary says he would absolutely not do. Apparently Zika did something awful to Robert years ago, so Mary is like, if he ever got you on the operating table, he would kill you. So I don't know why you think he would do anything in your favor. Absolutely not. While Zika is inside, he finds the monitors that look in on Vera while she's in her little cocoon, in her little yoga den. He gets real rapey and gross, and he licks the screen. Ew. And he says that she reminds him of someone, the dead wife. And Mary threatens him that if he doesn't leave out, she'll shoot him. He's able to overpower her because she doesn't want to shoot her own son. And he ties her up and keeps her where she is so that he can go and find Vera. When he eventually gets the key to go inside, Vera takes the chance to escape and she tries to rush out. However, Zika overpowers her, and he speaks to her as if they know each other, as if they have always known each other, and that they had a pre-existing sexual relationship. Vera decides to act like she knows what the fuck he's talking about, trying to negotiate her release from him while also trying not to be sexually assaulted. Like I said, warning, it's a lot in this movie because a lot about sexual violence is the core crux of this movie. So again, sorry. Robert returns home in the midst of the act taking place, and he sees them on the monitor, goes to shoot Vera, but doesn't shoot her. Instead, shoots Zika in the back 2 times, killing him instantly. Robert takes the body out so that he can dispose of it. And meanwhile, Mary and Vera have a conversation of the background of Robert and Zika, because apparently they are brothers and they are both Mary's children, but they were never told. Zika was the son of a servant, and Robert was the son of Mr. Legard, who was her boss. So she was fucking her boss and had his baby. Zika ran off to sell drugs at 7 years old. Overachiever. And he would come back periodically to cause chaos. Mary explains that Zika mistook Vera for Robert's deceased wife, Gal. Follow me. 12 years ago, Zika and Gal had an affair. It ended with them saying that they were going to run away together, away from Robert. But what happened is they got in a car crash. The car lit on fire, and Zika was able to escape, barely scathed, just the scars on his face. But Gal was burned severely in the car crash. Though she was severely burned, Robert was able to save her. And for months, he slowly was nursing her back to health. Mary says that for months they kind of lived like vampires with the lights off so that she would not see herself. But one day, after finally being able to get the strength to stand up on her own without assistance, she ventured to the window to hear their little daughter sing. In the course of doing that, caught a glimpse of her own reflection and was so depressed and shocked by it that she decided to take her own life by jumping out of the window. When she fell to her death, she fell right in front of their daughter, Norma, which later on would cause severe emotional and mental trauma for her throughout her life. Robert returns after burying Zika's body. Now, at this point, we can kind of tell that Vera feels a little bit of Stockholm syndrome while at the establishment, because again, Robert was gone burying a body and she was out here with an old lady. She could have punted her in the pussy and ran, but she didn't. She wanted to hear the whole story. At this point, you can tell that there's this, there's some Stockholm syndrome going on here. And as we'll learn later, Vera's been through some shit. Been through a lot. And that will be unpacked later, which kind of explains her complicated relationship with leaving at this point. Speaking of which, Vera and Robert began to have a sexual relationship. Consensual ? I mean, she's kidnapped, so Stockholm syndrome. But the process is painful for Vera, so they stop and they decide to go to sleep for the night. Like, it's really fucked up because if we didn't know that this woman had been kidnapped, because this is what we can assume at this point, it seems like a rather loving and consensual sexual relationship. Love each other, albeit a bit of an age gap, kind of creepy, but I don't know, it's giving very 365. They go to bed. And now we get a flashback to 6 years ago. It is the day of one of Robert's clients' wedding, and he goes there along with his daughter, Norma. Norma, as we've seen, has been through a lot. She saw her mother die in front of her, but this is a few years after that, and she's like a young adult woman. So she's grown up to have quite a few mental and emotional issues due to that trauma. You can tell that she's a bit developmentally under where she probably should be for her age. She seems to have a lot of social anxiety. And one of the triumphs of this night is that because she's had all those anxieties, she's actually doing quite well in this very populated area, which would have not been at all possible if she hadn't had so much intensive therapy and intensive work done for the last several years. And that's kind of what the bride kind of remarks about to Robert. Like, they're so happy to see her kind of existing normally to some degree. She even seems to be making some friends with the other young women at the party, and those women are making eyes at some other young men at the party. Side note, and not at all important, at least I don't think so, the wedding singer is amazing. If you could describe someone's music or their voice as like sweet cigar smoke, love it. I would love to hear more of her stuff. Thank you. The girls head out with the boys, and eventually Robert is kind of like, where's my daughter? Where did she go? And when he goes out into the garden, he finds that the girls that his daughter was hanging out with are all having an orgy out in the field. And he finds one of the men from earlier racing away from the field on his motorcycle. He eventually finds his daughter's shoes and clothing thrown upon the grass and eventually finds Norma unconscious next to a tree on the ground. He goes to wake her up, and when she does wake up, she's traumatized, screaming. She doesn't want her father anywhere near her. She doesn't know what's happening. And her father is just holding her close, trying to get her to calm down. We flash back even more, which, side note, they do not tell us this in the movie. You just in another scene and you're like, what's happening? It's still 6 years ago, but it's even further back before the wedding 6 years ago. We are sent to a dress shop and we see a man. His name is Vincente. Or Vincent. We see a man, his name is Vincent. He works in a dress shop with his mother and another woman who is lesbian. And we learn very quickly that he's a dick, very misogynistic, really like gross, hits on his coworker all the time, and it's really gross. He offers her pills to get her into the mood and make her like men from now on. Ugh. He's also quite short in stature, so again, I say this again, I don't have a problem with short men until short men have a problem with themselves, and then they push that on to everybody else. That's all I'm saying. But you can tell that he has a lot of this like, I need to exert myself as a man type energy, and it's very annoying. And apparently he's been invited to the wedding. While there, he meets Norma, and they all go to the garden. He introduces himself. He asks if she's intoxicated, if she's stoned. And she doesn't even know what that means. He says, have you taken any pills? Because I'm like off my mind right now. And she's like, oh yeah, I take hella pills. And she starts listing off a bunch of like antidepressants and anxiety meds. And he's like, wow, you're really tripping balls. And she was like, I don't know what that means. When she trips in her heels, he goes to kiss her. And she's like, again, awkward and doesn't know what's happening. She takes her shoes off because she hates the heels. She takes her sweater off because she doesn't like knit. And he takes this as her getting undressed for them to have sex. He then attempts to have sex with her. Again, I'm trying to not put too much of my opinion in it because I know that we'll have a lot to discuss in the second part of this movie. But it's very clear that the scene is written and performed as if it's supposed to be ambiguous about whether or not it was an assault scene, which I don't like that. I'm trying so hard to not put my opinion right here because I don't want it to skew like what discussion is had. Because the scene is ambiguous, if we're supposed to have some form of like sympathy towards Vincent, because spoiler, he gonna get a lot of shit happening to him. Anyway, Norma ends up starting to scream once she realizes what is happening. And in a panic, she screams, she bites his hand, and then he hits her, knocking her out. While she's unconscious, he fixes her dress to cover her breast and then flees the scene. A few days later, Vincent is at work and decides to get some air, and he tells his mother that he'll be back for supper. However, he never returns because he was kidnapped by Robert. He got that ass. Robert chains Vincent up in a damp basement where he gives him nothing but a bowl of water to drink out of like a dog. Meanwhile, Vincent's mother is filing a police report looking for him. Apparently, they never found a body, but they're just going to assume he's dead. And since the assault, Norma has been put back in the psych ward. Apparently, she's been there on and off again since her mother's suicide. When her father comes to visit her, she's petrified of him because she has confused him with her assaulter. I don't know why he didn't go to jail then, but eventually, due to the trauma, Norma eventually kills herself, much like her mother did by jumping out the window. And this is when Robert processes this less sad than we'd expect, and now more just like, all right, vengeance. He goes into the cave that he's been keeping Vincent in. He shaves his face, he knocks him out with chloroform, and prepares him for surgery. He invites his trusted associates to perform surgery with him, and they give him a vaginoplasty. Yeah. Let's keep going. Vaginoplasty is only the first of many surgeries that take place on Vincent or Vincente. I don't know. I call him Vincent. All of which were in order to make him look like his dead wife, eventually giving him a full body suit of this new generated armor that he created, new generated skin, and then he gets the body suit to keep everything intact. Vincent nearly escapes from captivity, but isn't able to make it out of the door. So instead, he attempts to kill himself. Robert is able to patch it up before it's fatal. But now that Vincent has gone through so many surgeries, he feels that it's no longer appropriate to refer to him as Vincent. He is now Vera. For continuity reasons only, I'm going to continue to refer to Vera as Vera because that's how we were introduced to Vera. Obviously, he didn't consent to transitioning, so should we refer to Vera as Vincent? Again, we can unpack the messiness around that in part 2 and in the comments. I'm sure y'all going crazy in the comments. Y'all saying a lot. Now begins the captivity period. Vera is placed in the room that we were introduced to in the beginning of the movie. This is where she reads about yoga, she watches 3 TV channels, makes cloth sculptures, and scribbles on the wall. And apparently, this becomes a daily ritual for 6 years. During this part of the timeline, Mary is rehired. Apparently, she worked again for Robert's family when his father was alive, so she has come back, and this is after Norma has passed away, and she's like, wow, I wish you would have called me when Norma passed away. And then she sees Vera for the first time, and she's like, why does she look like your dead wife? So back to the present, and Vera is now technically out of captivity, seemingly in this very strange, confusing, really weird Stockholm syndrome, crazy ass relationship. Robert is now sleeping with the person that assaulted his daughter because now he forced him to get gender reassignment surgery, and now that man is now a woman who looks like his dead wife who cheated on him with his brother. España. And Vera, who was Vincent, now is in a Stockholm relationship where she thinks that she is actually in love with Robert, so she doesn't go anywhere. She's able to live like they are a normal couple. She brings him breakfast. Mary is like, why are we trusting her given the circumstances? She'd have every reason to want to leave. Robert suggests that they go out and do some shopping together. And Mary's afraid that she'll get attacked on that trip, but nothing happens. They go out, they come back, everything's cool. But while they're gone, Robert has a visit from one of his old associates, ones that helped do the gender reassignment surgery for Vera, and knew that something was kind of not above board about this particular surgery. He finds out that the person that they operated on had been missing for 6 years. And he says, what if the board finds out that you kidnapped a person and then forced them to have reassignment surgery? But here comes Vera. She comes in and defends Robert, saying that she was not kidnapped and that she has always been a woman. Vera and Robert have sex, but it hurts. So she remembers that she has some lubricant in her purse in the basement. And while she's down there, she seemingly comes about her wits, steals Robert's gun that was downstairs, and shoots him dead in the bedroom. Mary hears the shot, goes to investigate, and she is also killed, saying she knew it before taking her last breath. Vera escapes, coming into her mother's shop and seeing that a lot has changed over the course of 6 years. She announced that she is Vincent and that a lot has happened while she was gone, and that is the end of the movie. The credits start to roll. Okay. If you had no idea what this movie is about, I can guarantee you didn't think that's where we're going with it. There's a lot to unpack here in regards to gender, gendered violence, conversation around consent, which I find very unsettling. There's also some elements that we could discuss in regards to whether or not this movie subverts or perpetuates a lot of kind of transphobic rhetoric. I think there's a lot to discuss there. I think depending on how you look at it, it could be more or less in either direction. I was considering like asking some trans creators to really lend opinions on part 2, but when I don't know if I'll have a lot of time to do that. And also, I don't want to just pop in and be like, hey, trans person, can I trigger you possibly? Like, I don't want to do that. So I'm gonna read up on articles in regards to anyone that has opinions on the film as a trans person. I think kind of garnering opinions in that regard would be a lot better, and then lending whatever benefit, if any, my cisgendered opinion would be in regards to that. Again, my opinion in that conversation really doesn't matter. But yeah, I want to talk about all of that and more. And also I want to hear more about your opinions on the film generally, just hearing what the synopsis is. I'd love to read. Oh, I'm a nerd. I want to hear it all in the comment section. I'd love to read through that. But with that said, as a film, not gonna lie, I liked it. I felt like I was sucked in. I didn't know where I was going. I feel like it is a movie that I kind of want more people to watch if you've never heard of it. Flawed. Absolutely. From what I understand, the director is a gay man, and he himself has presented a lot of his work, from what I understand. I haven't seen his other things, but from articles I've been reading in regards to it, that he's spent a lot of time kind of using film to unpack his musings and questions around gender. To what degree it was successful is ultimately up to the viewer. I'm not going to lend too much more on my opinion because that's for part 2, baby. With that said, I am going to plan to have part 2 up by next week. Instead of doing what I did for the midsummer videos, I waited like 6 months in between each video. The plan is to have the second part next week. If not next week, the week after that. But yeah, if you like this video, feel free to like this video and follow me on all my social media, Instagram, Twitter, both of which are KennieJD. And I will see you guys next time.